ass in Creed, ladies and gentlemen. I played Valhalla, I played 3 hours of it, and I'm here to share with you my impressions of that experience. Do keep in mind that what I played was an early build of the game, so I did encounter plenty of bugs that the developers are well aware of and that they're going to fix down the line, and I'm not allowed to show those bugs, which again the developers know exist and are going to fix by the time the game launches, so we'll see how that turns out. I did play this game in a virtual environment through Parsec. I essentially streamed the game online. Obviously, they couldn't set up physical stations due to what's going on around the world. So through Parsec, I streamed the game, and it went pretty smoothly. There were a couple stutters here and there. There were some noticeable input lag, and there was some noticeable compression of the video, but it was very playable. I got a pretty good idea for what this experience is like based on the build that I played. And at its core, ladies and gentlemen, if you like that Assassin's Creed Odyssey or Origins style Assassin's Creed, you're probably gonna like this one too. If you don't like the more recent Assassin's Creed games, you're not gonna like this one. It is very much that exact same model, very similar gameplay. The control scheme was damn near identical. Having played Odyssey recently before this demo, I was very comfortable with the controls as soon as I got into it. And we all know that the latest Assassin's Creed games have a stronger emphasis on combat. Like, there's stealth and assassination, but combat is definitely taken more of a spotlight with these new titles, and it's the same with this game. You know, you've got your light and heavy attacks. Light attacks deal damage, heavy attacks are more for breaking enemies' defenses. And you've got a number of melee and ranged abilities that you can activate at any given point assigned to a wheel. Left trigger is for the ranged abilities, and then right trigger is for the melee abilities. So the abilities that I had access to are, for melee, Kick of Tur, which sees Eivor, the main character, perform an axe swing followed by a kick that knocks enemies down. There is Throwing Axe of Fury, which sees Eivor just hurl axes at nearby enemies. Pretty cool animation. I do like the cinematic nature of the camera right as this attack is activated, though I will say this attack can sometimes lack impact. I don't know if they're going to fix that down the line, but there are times when enemies just don't react to axes being hurled at them, and it's a bit of a comical and disconnecting effect. Then we have Rush and Bash, which is essentially a football tackle, and when it works, it does feel pretty good to smash someone into a pit of fire and stuff like that, but oftentimes this ability wouldn't work for me. It was actually very tough to control and turn around, and if you miss, you can't cancel it, at least as far as I know, so you have to kind of wait until the whole running animation plays out, and you just look like an idiot running around helplessly, so they need to fix that. There's Poison Strike, which dips your blade in poison and allows you to do poison damage. And finally, there's Dive of the Valkyries, which is this devastating jump attack that knocks enemies down, and this ability was unlocked with a book of knowledge that I found after I finished a mission. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you'll be earning a lot of your active abilities via this book of knowledge system. You find those in the world, and they teach you these abilities. And you also can upgrade abilities to a second level by finding more of the same book with the same ability. So the Dive of Valkyries was pretty satisfying to use, but it was maybe a bit too powerful. It was actually very easy to kill enemies with this, combined with the stomp move. You click R3 when an enemy is down and you stomp them and deal a pretty good amount of damage. There's also some cinematic camera work when you use this ability, but it could be a bit disorienting, the way the camera kind of flails around, so they need to dial that down. For ranged abilities, there is Ranged Poison Strike, dips your arrow in poison, which for some reason, the headshots with poison dipped into them do less damage versus when arrows are not poisoned. I don't know, there was a weird discrepancy there. Mark of Death allows you to target multiple targets. At the level the ability was in my playthrough, you could essentially target up to 3 people and then shoot the marked targets, and it would shoot all 3 of them. The arrows would essentially home in on them. There is Raven Distraction, which allows you to call in your trusty bird, the Raven, to distract enemies. And finally, there's Thorn of Slumber, which is a sleep arrow. And all of these active abilities cost adrenaline, which are bars that fill up as you fight and kill enemies. So the gameplay loop becomes fighting enemies and then finding the right time to use your abilities for the most efficient takedowns and the most efficient form of combat. And you can have 4 melee and 4 ranged abilities active at any one time, and you'll have to swap between them. You're definitely going to find more than 4 abilities for both melee and ranged. As for what I think of the overall combat experience, I felt it was a mixed bag. I felt like more often than not, combat just lacked a sense of impact. In the demo, at the very least, combat just felt unrefined. It felt kind of awkward, loose. Attacks didn't have a strong sense of connection. There would be times when I could feel a bit of impact because of some of the sound effects that played, the crunch of enemies' heads being crushed. And when animations linked properly, you did feel a bit of that sense of impact and connection. But overall, combat felt janky, like there was a lot more refining to do. So hopefully they can work out those kinks by the time the game launches. But generally speaking, for both Odyssey and Origins, combat was really never my favorite part of those games. Combat always felt like they didn't have much impact, and I don't suspect too much is going to change on that front with this game. Combat always felt kind of loose to me, so it's a little disappointing to see that not a lot of strides have been made on that front. I did enjoy Eivor's abilities though. I think combat can feel dynamic if you know how to properly utilize all of these different abilities, and combat can look very cinematic even if it doesn't quite feel as impactful as it should. And I really did enjoy some of the finisher moves that Eivor performed from time to time. Those you could definitely feel the impact. Those definitely packed a punch. Really well animated. I think Assassin's Creed has always had really good finisher move animations. There are some new mechanics when it comes to combat, like using your horn. You have this like Viking horn that allows you to call in men to raid certain points of interest, and so that allows you to perform group combat, and that's optional. You can decide to solo it if you want, but you can also send in your men as well, which is an interesting mechanic. Health also works differently in this game. It no longer regenerates. If you get damaged, you have to find food around the world in the form of mushrooms or berries and the like. And if you're at full health and collect food, then you're going to get health regeneration rations that's going to continue building up as you keep collecting food that you can use at any point in battle when your health is starting to deplete. So this game is less forgiving with health and has you keep track of your HP. And then another major change is something called Odin Sight, which is this kind of pulse that emanates from your character, and this is something that's featured in Odyssey as well, but there's much more of an emphasis on Odin Sight. Basically, this is the way you mark targets. If you want to stealth attack them, for example, and want to know their location, Odin Sight will permanently mark them. It's no longer with the bird. You no longer have to go bird's eye view and tag them individually. If you're close enough and you hit Odin Sight, then it'll tag all those targets alongside anything lootable or any sort of point of interest that is worth looking into. So throughout my demo, there was this constant emphasis on keep using Odin Sight. It is your best friend in this game. And as far as stealth goes, I'll be honest, it didn't feel great in this demo. In large part because the enemy AI was inconsistent. I suspect that they're still working on it, that the AI is not finalized, but based on what I played in this demo, it just made stealth hard to enjoy. It just made it a little frustrating, and it wasn't very immersive. There were times when enemies were dumb as a rock and just kind of stood there while allies got taken down. Or after being detected, it was just comically easy to hide from them. Just had to take a few steps into the grass, and then they would just give up on looking for me. And then there were other times when they were unreasonably smart. They would see me from a mile away. Like this one time I was up on a rooftop and some dude way down below saw me somehow, but nobody else did. It was just the one guy. And then other times I'd get spotted without much in the way of warning. And there was this one time when an enemy spotted me instantly, even though he was not really directly facing my way. I was trying to like do some fancy maneuvering and kind of assassinate him, but the enemy detected me instantly. And then when I hit the button, the R1 button, the prompt for assassinating the target, it didn't really register. Eivor just did a light attack instead, and I got detected that way, and that was really frustrating. So there's a lot of refinement that needs to be done on that front. There were times when stealth did work properly though, and those few times it could be satisfying. In this demo, I found that every assassination did kill instantly, instead of, enemies surviving assassination attacks. Due to the RPG nature of these modern Assassin's Creed games, if an enemy's too high level, then chances are that your assassination attempt won't work. It doesn't matter if you shove a knife through their face and into their brain. Somehow they survive, which I always never really enjoyed about the new Assassin's Creed games. Now, there were some assassinations that required this timing minigame, but that only happened once. Other times, it wasn't required, so I don't know why that minigame pops up. I don't know what the circumstances are for that happening. And I will also add that I enjoy the chain assassination maneuver in this game, where you assassinate someone, and if you actually got the skill to be able to perform chain assassinations, after you assassinate someone, you can press R1 again and throw an axe at a nearby individual, and I love the way the camera follows that axe, and that felt really good to pull off. So there were bright moments in stealth, but for the most part, enemy AI was woefully inconsistent. I didn't really get the rules of this game's artificial intelligence, and so sometimes I found enemies to be too dumb, other times too smart, and it wasn't a fully satisfying stealth experience, which is not great for a game titled Assassin's Creed. Now, I talked a little bit about progression, how chain assassination is one of the skills you can earn, and there's an expansive skill tree in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. There are 3 branches that you can focus on, or that you can spread yourself across. There's the Raven branch, which is more stealth-focused, the Bear branch, which is more melee-focused, and the Wolf branch, which is more range-focused, bow and arrow and the like. And the interface has this constellation look to it that's pretty cool. And there are small nodes that grant you smaller stat upgrades, so stuff like increasing max health, increasing melee damage, increasing assassination damage, increasing range damage, etc. And those eventually lead into the big nodes that result in substantial ability and skill unlocks, like extra adrenaline bar, the chain assassination ability, the ability to roll after falling a great distance, so you take less damage when you fall off a cliff or something. There is the Predator Bow combo that grants more damage per consecutive headshots. There's a sprint attack that you can unlock. There's this emergency aim ability that snaps your aim to an enemy when they're about to detect you. There is parry damage and lots more. These big nodes are what you're going to be working towards while progressing through the game. And I liked what I experienced of it. I obviously have to play the whole game to see how that progression feels, but it felt like I was constantly earning skill points and constantly upgrading my character, so that felt pretty good. And I do like how there were different paths towards these nodes, and the skill tree seemed pretty flexible, allowing you to kind of tailor your character to the playstyle that you want by choosing the specific stat upgrades and the bigger nodes and ability unlocks that you prefer. And the skill tree seems very expansive. Like, most of it in the demo was covered in fog, and one time I reached the edge and was able to unlock more abilities, and that fog continues, and so I suspect the skill tree and the branches really expand outwards quite a bit. Another major aspect of Valhalla's progression is obviously inventory. You can earn pieces of armor and weapons. It's very loot heavy, much like it was with Odyssey and Origins. I didn't get to play around too much with that, but I did get this one weapon that was part of the demo called the Spinning Death Flail, which was pretty freaking awesome. There's a slow windup, but once you get going, it just freaking mows enemies down like a Viking nunchuck, basically. It's just a continuous flurry of blows that actually felt pretty cool. Though again, there is a lack of impact that I wish there was more of. I wish attacks felt more connected so I could feel every strike. But it was fun to use that particular weapon. I thought it was pretty unique. And the game does lean more towards RPG. You're going to see numbers pop up as you deal damage to enemies. Headshots with bow and arrow aren't guaranteed to kill an enemy, which personally bothers me. Like, I understand that they want to emphasize, this sense of progression with the looting and trying to RPG-fy it a little more and trying to see if that makes for a more compelling experience. For my part, though, I think that a headshot should kill an enemy automatically. I think that assassination should kill enemies automatically if you planned out things well enough. I think the game should reward you for being tactical. But again, if you enjoyed Odyssey and Origins, which have that same RPG system, then you're probably going to enjoy Valhalla. It's more of the same, but a variation of that same system with its own coat of paint and with certain variations in mechanics and the like. Now, I did like the atmosphere that this game gives off. The setting is very much sort of Nordic inspired. It is based in England, but the atmosphere is very Witcher-esque. It's got this somber and rustic atmosphere. It's a stark contrast to the very colorful and bright Greece from Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and the Viking music further accentuates the atmosphere. And the music also very much reminds me of Witcher in some respects. And, you know, that's not a bad game to take inspiration from, though I do think Witcher 3, despite it being from 2015, somehow looks way prettier than this game, just in terms of graphical fidelity and, like, just the way trees sway and the, like, Witcher 3 really nailed down the atmosphere, the weather effects. The world feels a little stale in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but I do generally enjoy the ominous atmosphere that it all gives off. Like, the world is kind of cursed. It's got that feeling to it. And as far as the world and what you can do in it goes, there's a wide variety of activities. There are world events that you'll be able to encounter, you know, talk to NPCs, and you might be able to engage in smaller quests and stories and events that you can stumble upon. So one time I helped a kid find a cat, though I think the quest was glitched because the cat didn't move and he was just kind of right where the kid was standing, so all I had to do was walk a short distance and the quest was complete. Another world event involved finding these wandering kids, very kind of tribal, and listening to their stories and then giving them some food. It was just like little stuff. And then there's puzzle locations that you can find, and you can do stuff like destroying cursed objects. There is this minigame involving assembling a tower of rocks or something, which I think is part of the Nordic mythology. There is one puzzle that involved having to stand in the right location so that a symbol can be formed by looking at this structure from the right perspective. There's also world bosses, and the ones that I encountered I thought actually were really cool. There's one where Eivor gets drugged before fighting this sort of witch-like boss battle, and because of that drug, the boss kind of has this supernatural, spectral vibe, and the whole aura of this place had, again, this very Witcher-cursed vibe. It took me a couple tries for this boss battle, had to learn her patterns, and actually enjoyed the process of overcoming this encounter. I fought this legendary animal, a feral creature called the Black Shuck, which was an easier boss battle, but a cool encounter nonetheless. So there seems to be a wide variety of world bosses based on what little I played of the game, 3 hours. My hope is that these bosses don't repeat, that every boss really does feel unique. And then throughout the world, you also find some mini games. There's this drinking game at a wedding at one point in the story of the game, and you have to like maintain rhythm and button presses while also tilting the analog stick to maintain balance. And there's plenty of stuff like that just out in the world. Generally, the thing that I enjoyed most about my experience was exploring and seeing what's out there. Hopefully, the variety of activities will be substantial and challenging in order to sustain dozens of hours. Hopefully, I won't see all of the types of activities within the first few hours of the game, and it'll just be a copy and paste type of scenario where it's just the same activities over and over again. Hopefully, the activities do remain varied throughout the whole experience. As for world navigation, there's the usual parkour that feels very reminiscent of what you'd find in Odyssey and in Origins. I do feel like the parkour felt better in this game. I don't know if it's just like an illusion or something. I don't know if I'm just imagining it, but I feel like it felt a little easier to navigate generally. They kind of made things a little looser in terms of the character sticking to certain points in the environment. So I felt I had a smoother time transitioning from one structure to another while walking and running and jumping and climbing around. But it was just like a minor thing, nothing revolutionary per se. There's horseback riding, of course. You can also fast travel between synchronized points or discovered locations. And you can also take this longboat that allows you to navigate through the world, which has this network of rivers that kind of spreads out like veins. And by the way, the map itself is pretty humongous. Only had access to a small portion of it in the demo. There was a boundary that I couldn't go beyond. But when I zoomed out in the map menu, yeah, it was pretty humongous. So there's going to be plenty to do in this game, though again, I hope there is density here rather than emphasis on volume. I hope they can justify the size of the map with quality and variety of missions and activities. Speaking of missions, I did 2 main missions in this 3-hour demo. The first main mission had me just clear out this village so that we could take it back. And that involves just taking out all the enemies, whether it's through combat or stealth. And then the second mission, the bigger mission, was the castle raid. I did not have a great time with the castle raid. I thought it was kind of boring. It was just kind of hordes of enemies that you had to take down, then use a battering ram, and then you just rinse and repeated that 3 times. There was very little variation in what you did in that castle raid. It did eventually culminate in a boss battle. This fellow with a wolf, and I had to fight both, though I ended up destroying that guy. Apparently, according to the guy helping me with the demo, the Ubisoft rep, others had a lot of trouble. I did it incredibly fast, to the point where he jotted down notes that needed to be rebalanced. It's just the combination of abilities that I used really just utterly annihilated him. So yeah, it wasn't really a memorable boss battle, that one, given how quickly he died. But yeah, that was the castle raid. I don't know. It was basically a set piece that didn't have much going for it. To close things off, let's talk about graphics. I'll be honest with you, at this point, this Ubisoft engine, whatever engine they're using for these Assassin's Creed games, it's starting to look pretty dated. The textures in this game, the character models are not flattering at all. Textures look muddy, character models look pretty ugly more often than not. Though, when you zoom out and look at the world itself, I think it can look very pretty. There are some really cool vistas, and again, the atmosphere of the world, I think they nailed. But just the technical aspects of the game, in terms of the lighting, the models, the textures, all of that, I've seen better looking games. Again, Witcher 3 looks better than this game, and it's that game's 5 years old. So I don't know if the graphics are going to be bolstered, or if this is about what we can expect in the final version of the game. But it's not the prettiest game I've seen, even if atmospherically and artistic direction-wise, they seem to be going in a really cool and interesting direction. And finally, there's story. I thought the story was pretty uninteresting in this demo, but I have to play the full game before I can really determine and make a full judgment, because it kind of dropped me in the middle, like halfway through the game, you know, and I just didn't have a good sense for what exactly the conflict was. I mean, obviously it's Vikings versus the English, but I don't know. There was just a lot of talk about, oh, we need to take this back and we need to take that back, but I wasn't really feeling it. I did think that character interactions felt kind of very stoic.
To the good King Oswald! Skull!
To Oswald!
Skull!
Skull! Skull! Okay, everyone, the bridal race starts now.
There was also something about the presentation that I felt made character interactions feel very artificial and kind of awkward. And again, just the facial animations weren't all there. The character models just didn't look quite right. And so it was hard for me to stay immersed in the story, given that the presentation felt off and the story itself didn't present me compelling characters. And Eivor as a character so far hasn't really clicked with me. Like, I love Cassandra from Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I loved just her performance, the kind of attitude that she had, the dialogue, and the personality that she had. Eivor, I don't know, he seems a bit generic so far. Just, you know, I'm a Viking and I want to fight and we need to liberate people. And it was just kind of like that generic aspect throughout the whole 3 hours. But maybe I'll find more nuances in other parts of the game, other parts of the story once I've played through the whole game. So yeah, that's that, ladies and gentlemen. Overall, I have very mixed feelings about this game. I wasn't blown away by it. I, again, enjoyed the atmosphere and the activities in the world and just exploring the world and seeing what's out there. But combat and stealth need a lot of refinement. AI needs a lot of polishing. The animations, there were so many janky animations that I can't show that I'm sure they're going to try to fix before launch, but all of that made combat less impactful. It made combat more awkward than it really needed to be. And combat seems to carry what previous entries had, the flaws that previous entries had, which was a lack of a sense of impact. Time will tell how this whole experience turns out. But in the meantime, this is my experience, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on what you've seen of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Are you excited for this game? Or are you going to skip this one? Or are you in wait-and-see mode? Drop a comment below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.